Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. This is a webinar brought to you by Proceed Group. The title is The Benefits Beyond GDPR Compliance, and we've got two of our GDPR experts here from Proceed joining us today, which is Chris Burfitt and Mark Johnson. Okay, so what we'll cover is we're just going to have a quick overview of the status of GDPR. So what's been happening over the past 6 years or so in the GDPR space. What are some of the typical scenarios where customers are kind of getting things a little bit wrong and where actions having to be taken. And then we'll get on to the main topic of today, which is the benefits beyond compliance. And we'll be looking at some of the challenges, solutions, and other considerations around that as well. Okay. So just introductions. My name's Rebecca Robinson. I'm the marketing lead here at Proceed Group, and I'm joined by my colleagues, like I said, Chris Burfitt and Mark Johnson. Chris, I don't know if you just wanted to quickly introduce yourself.
Sure. Yeah. My main subject area in SAP is HCM, HR data, but I've been working in other areas of compliance as well with customers, vendors, and business partners. Suppliers, information in SAP. I've been around SAP since 1999, so a fairly long career in implementation, and then came into this sort of area of expertise when GDPR came in. In fact, I was doing a little bit of data protection work under the previous legislation, and then hence it was a sort of a shoe-in to start working with GDPR when it came in. So yeah, I've been working with it right since, well, about a year before it actually became live as a law in the UK. So yeah, quite a long time now.
Great, thank you. And Mark?
Bizarrely, I've been around in SAP for just a little bit more than 25 years. Like Chris, we're hitting our quarter century of SAP work, so that's not bad. We should get time off for good behaviour eventually. I specialise in implementing projects with information lifecycle management technologies for Proceed Group, and one of the technologies that we use to manage GDPR is the ILM range of technologies. So that's why I'm here with to bringing my expertise on that.
Great, brilliant, thank you. Okay, so the first question that we have is how are data protection regulations being enforced, and what are some of the common scenarios where organisations have faced regulatory action?
Okay, so what you guys on the call may or may not have done, like I've done, is gone onto the ICO website and had a look at actually what the Information Commissioner's Office in the UK have been doing. And I'm making apologies for anyone who isn't in the UK. We are going to sort of be a bit UK centric on this. Clearly, there's bodies right through Europe similar to the Information Commissioner's Office in the UK. I haven't gone into their websites and looked at their actions, but so this is a very UK centric view. But as you can see from the figures here, this was actually somewhat surprising to me, and maybe surprising to you, as to how few actions there have actually been. This is the total number of actions by the Information Commissioner's Office since the regulation came in 2018. And as you can see, it's relatively low, and the majority there are not actually sort of enforcement or monetary penalties. There's a lot of reprimands there. They're actually being relatively lenient on organisations in terms of actually taking action. And it's only in the particularly serious cases of data breaches where there's been penalties. So we can see as well from the charts that are up there on the screen that the majority of the actions are being taken against marketing companies. And a lot of these actions are around unsolicited marketing campaigns. So, in the reference to an SAP implementation, an SAP environment, SAP compliance, clearly a lot of the actions don't relate to that type of scenario. But that's not to say that there aren't some of these enforcement notices and a lot of the reprimands, in fact, and indeed some of the monetary penalties that are related to SAP systems. But what we were surprised about, and sort of the reason for the webinar really to talk about what are the benefits beyond compliance, is that in terms of a business case, it's sort of weakens the business case really when we look at the figures as to what the actions have been taken. So we thought, well, okay, what can we do to help our customers strengthen that business case again? What can we do to get other parts of your organization interested in what you might want to do in a compliance project? So that was sort of really what got us thinking about, okay, when we do a compliance project, what's the wider benefit to the organization? What could be the wider cost saving, for instance, or the wider benefit in terms of data management?
Mm-hmm. And you did just put an example here, a case study from Police Service of Northern Ireland, didn't you?
Yeah, this is a pretty extreme one that probably everybody on the call has heard of or seen something in the news about. It was very well publicised. There was a very significant data breach from the systems at the Northern Ireland Police Service. So this is an example where there was a data breach. It was to do with the way that the data was managed in an HR system. I have to admit, I don't know whether it was an SAP system, but really, to be honest, it doesn't really matter. It was an HR personnel system where the data was lost from, or rather it was extracted from and then incorrectly published. So this does demonstrate that there is still a case there. There is still a risk there. There is still a need to be compliant. So that's not taking away that business need and that business part of the business case. And as we can see, the fine was quite substantial. In the grand scheme of things, for a big corporate company, maybe that's not very much, but for a lot of companies, that is quite a substantial hit. And of course, the reputational damage to the Police Service of Northern Ireland was very significant and caused a great deal of embarrassment, which, to be honest, is probably even more of a problem than the fine itself.
Okay, and just before we go on, sorry, I know there's some people arrived a little bit later. Just to let you know, you've got a QA box and a chat box for you to enter any questions, and we've got a little bit of time at the end there to answer those. So please feel free to pop them in there throughout. Okay, so just onto the main topic of the webinar. What are some of the broader benefits beyond compliance?
Mark, do you want to chip in first, or shall I go on this one?
You seem to be mid-flow there. So if I can get a word in edgeways for 2 seconds, and that was very, very interesting. I do have one comment on what you just said about the lack of finding that seems to be going on. Do you think that they were lenient to start off with, and then they're going to get more and more aggressive as time goes by in terms of actually finding people? Because I seem to remember somewhere you can be fined up to 4% of your annual turnover as an organisation. So that could be quite a bit of money if being fined. And you do know the government's looking for extra cash, so so that could be a good way of them actually filling a deficit.
It's an interesting one, Mark. I mean, certainly it's rather than the money going to the government, the fines go directly to the ICO. So the ICO is funded by the fines. So the more fines they make, the more money that they're going to come into their coffers, and they can pay for more compliance officers, for instance. So it is an interesting one as to whether that might fuel more actions that result in a fine and a penalty. But certainly there doesn't seem to be a pattern there at the minute that would indicate that there is more. There are more fines lately, shall we say? Yeah.
Okay. So, excuse me. One of the things that we've come across since the implementation of GDPR, there was an initial splurge of interest in doing projects, and then a lot of potential customers found out how expensive it is to actually realize the technology to make their SAP system GDPR compliant, and that is a little bit of a hard upsell within the organization. What I mean by that is that most financial directors, financial controllers, senior executives within an organization are really interested in putting money into projects which are going to enable them either to do what they do on a day-to-day basis more efficiently and for less money, or to do more of what they do. And being GDPR compliant, well, the only thing that you seem to get out of that is your compliance status, and of course not getting fined if you run into trouble or run ashore on the rocks. So one of the things that we've been looking at is that, okay, so what else can we do during a GDPR project? And we've started to, with the ILM side of what we're doing here, is we're going to customers now which are going through that process of migrating to S4HANA. And one of the things we're doing is we're actually implementing data archiving, information lifecycle management as a project prior to moving into the HANA environment, which means that from the get-go, we're managing some of that data, which is A, going to bloat your new S4 system out, but B, make you subject to, if anybody got hold of the data, they would say, well, why are you keeping data beyond the point in which you're supposed to keep that particular type of data for your organization? So we're kind of winning in that area now by helping companies move more effectively over into the S4 environment, and at the same time helping them meet their GDPR requirements by actually managing the data that's inside there.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. And one of the things I personally have found with our recent projects is there's a disconnect between the sort of the IT and technical side of things and the business compliance side of things, and actually getting those two parties together. Quite often we're finding that the requirement is the same but for different reasons, and this is where we want to expand on this slide by sort of demonstrating really what do we commonly want to do on a compliance project. Well, there's quite a lot of things around, maybe you're hiding data, maybe you're making it more difficult to get to it, but quite a significant part of a compliance project is removing data that shouldn't be stored anymore, and that could be from lots of different places, and removing that data, it makes you compliant. But what we're then expanding on for people and getting the technical teams involved in is saying, well, okay, well, now we're removing that data. Have you realized that what an impact that this is now going to have on your database as a whole, but also if you want to do that migration to S4HANA, and then after you've gone to S4HANA, how that can control the costs of S4HANA. And one of the things we're finding continually with our customers who have gone to S4HANA is a lot of the technical teams are coming to us and saying, we need to find some way of keeping this database under control, because we're at risk of going to a new price band in the in-memory cost. Also risk, even with the archiving, say that we've archived to SAP IQ, even that has price bands as well. So the bigger IQ is, the more you're going to pay for it. So then that's where the compliance comes in, because you've got a really good reason to be applying the destruction rules then to data, and that can keep the database size in check, and it can also help with the size of the SAP IQ system. So getting the two parties together, getting the compliance side and the technical side, get them talking to each other. Sometimes you'll find, or quite often we'll find, it's different revenue streams as well. So there's different budget in each of those areas. So that can add into the whole business case and help pay for the project.
Yeah, well, my final comment on this particular topic, which is again something else I've found in these projects, where we're actually part of the team that's moving the data across from the legacy system into the S4HANA environment. We're being asked repeatedly to be able to set up archiving for the S4HANA environment, so that we're archiving data from the get-go to try and maintain the amount of data that we have in the in-memory database. But also, we seem to be proactively asked now to implement things like blocking for access to customer and service business part of master data, HR blocking and that sort of stuff, because we've got kind of like a new blank piece of paper, and rather than investing in the old ECC system, which then was on the way out anyway, they're now more willing to actually invest as they're building the new S4 environment to make sure that it is GDPR compliant. So we're starting to get some traction there with that.
And the blocking one's a really interesting one, Mark, because quite often we'll talk about blocking data in the live system, but archiving is also a form of blocking. So for anyone on the call who's not familiar with SAP archiving, when we archive something, it moves it into some sort of content repository, and to get to the data in that repository needs a specific authorization object. So if you've just got authorizations, you don't have the object that allows you to see archive data, you've effectively blocked that data by moving it into the archive. So again, there's an overlap there between a compliance need, which is I only want certain people to see certain data, and also the technical need of we want to keep as little as possible in the live database because it's cheaper to move it into some sort of storage, some sort of cold storage or archive, or where the cost of the storage is lower.
Yep.
Okay, thank you both. And on the journey to compliance to achieve some of these benefits, what are some of the challenges businesses might encounter?
You want to take this one first, Mark?
Yeah. So the first challenge is motivating senior people to actually invest in doing this as part of the program. So then, to be able to do that, you need to have, well, what's the business case for doing this? And as we just mentioned, in the move to S4, there's a business case because it's easier now to include things like your GDPR compliance as you're setting up your S4 system than it is to go and put it in at a later date. So it becomes part of the project. People are looking more and more at archiving to enable them to maintain the health of the system and the cost-effective running of their system on an S4 HANA appliance, etc. So that's one of the business case is one of the key things where we start to try and push forward the whole concept of meeting our GDPR requirements in there. There is a risk, as we say, of what happens if we don't do anything. But that's a perceived risk, which, unless you're in the same industry as somebody that's just been fined a huge amount of money for non-compliance in a particular area, and you'll realize that you're not compliant in it, you're highly unlikely to get traction in there, especially as, let's face it, the ICO's not exactly gone out and fined everybody that it could have done to the extent that it should have done. Okay. So with this, you need to try and find your business case, your project sponsors. You've got to get an appetite for change within the organization so that from the ground up, you're building your new environment or taking your existing environment and making it GDPR compliant. There's always this argument to say that, well, it's been like this for the last 20 years. Why do we bother change? Why are we going to change it? Well, and of course, nobody really likes change, etc. In there. So it's difficult to, first of all, upsell this into the management that need to spend money to achieve it. It's also equally as difficult to get buy-in from the users who are actually the day-to-day operators of that data to try and get them to buy into working in a slightly different ways. So for example, you can have somebody working with a data set and they can see that data set going back over the last 20 years. And now you're saying, well, no, you can't, because those customers have now left. And after 2 or 3 years of them leaving, you no longer have a right under GDPR to be looking at the GDPR relevant data for that customer. So that customer should be blocked unless you have a specific need to go, which you log and audit and access the data. So you've got to get the users to agree to or come to terms with, shall we say, the change in attitude to being able to access data within the system. Okay.
The interesting one that I find taking on this slide as well, in reference to the how much the problem is costing, what about the organizational change, and identifying if the problem or solution is part of a bigger process journey. Particularly when moving to S/4HANA or preparing for that move, there's usually a business process analysis and looking at your processes, saying, can you run them better? Now, this is where compliance can help in that as well, in that what GDPR says is that you should be doing data compliance by design. Data protection compliance by design. So every new thing that you're implementing, you should just build it in. Now, by doing that compliance design as part of the business process design in S/4HANA, it brings the compliance and governance side into that process. And again, it's a good part of the business process to say, well, this isn't just about making things smoother for the team that run this process, and it's not just about maybe that there is an impact on the database or the SAP, the way that SAP runs things. It's the data compliance team then get involved and go, actually, yes, we've got an interest in this as well. And to be brutally honest, a lot of these projects, you're going to need a lot of funding, and there's another funding source for you when you can get compliance and governance involved, and you say, okay, we're happy to build in that compliance for you, but clearly you've got to give us some contribution towards this project so that we can build that in. And that gives you a better overall business case. It hopefully helps with your funding. And when you're taking that case to the financial controllers, it's not just we need a new system and we want to move to S/4HANA, but you can build up that case as to all of those things behind it as to why that's a good thing, and the sort of investment that you want to do in your business processes to build that compliance by design into the solution.
Great, thank you. I'm going to move on because I'm just conscious of time. We're sort of 27 minutes in now, so shall we move on to sort of some of the solutions to consider when managing this data?
Sure. Well, shall I cover this one, Mark, and I'll leave you to our to the next slide, which I know is our one of our Proceed tools. Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we're not going to go into any great detail on this. Clearly, we've only got a short amount of time, but where the main benefit is going to come outside of the actual compliance is by the three main things. So, redesigning processes so that there's a reduction in the amount of data that is in the system. And now, that means that particularly for technical data, you want to remove it. But when we talk about technical data, that can include GDPR relevant data, because there could be GDPR relevant data in workflows. It could be in interface logs. There's all sorts of technical places where GDPR data can be. So we also have to think about that compliance, and that helps then with, okay, why are we doing this? Why are we trying to get rid of the data? Actually, because it helps make things smaller, but it also helps us be compliant. Also, data avoidance. There will be areas where you're generating data, and again, GDPR relevant data, and you go, well, actually, we're not sure why we're generating that anyway. And again, sometimes when we look behind processes, we'll find maybe an SAP standard workflow that's being generated, and that has the person's name in it. Maybe it has their date of birth in it, has their address, it has the absence type, for instance, in an HR process. And removing that workflow or disabling it not only helps you be compliant, but it avoids generating it in the first place. And that's data avoidance. And then in SAP, we have our end of purpose tools, which I'm sure a lot of people on the call are already aware of, which is the way that we can purge data out of the system when it's no longer required. So we can get rid of that data using the ILM tools. We can look at, as long as it's end of purpose, removing it to either directly from the database or from the archive. And then, we have that downstream propagation. If we've got an interfaces, we could pass that destruction via an interface, or we could use something like Data Protection Workbench for Business Warehouse.
Okay, thank you. And then just onto the Proceed tool.
That's back over to me. So one of the challenges we found, and this specifically came out of the HR environment to start off with, was that implementing the SAP strategy for deleting data out of HR is quite a large project, quite time consuming. You're looking at about 6 to 9 months to be able to set up all the necessary archiving objects. The reason being is that different sets of data are taken up by different archiving objects that need to be created. It's deletion only object, by the way, so once the data's gone, it's gone, etc. So it's quite a challenge to be able to implement that in a timely fashion. Also, what we found was that a lot of companies didn't want to destroy data or delete data out of the system. What they particularly wanted to do was be able to prevent data from people from accessing that data, or to become part of the report, so that it was, you want it to be, anything that's GDPR relevant, it to be obfuscated. So from a HR perspective, we built a solution which enables you, once an employee has left, to be able to redact data within inside the employee's file, so that you can't see the relevant GDPR information. Sorry, that's my front door. The other thing it does is enables you to unredact it should you need to get back at that data for audit purposes. Then ultimately, later on in life, you'll want to be able to destroy certain elements of that data. We have customers that say, okay, well, after 3 years, I want to destroy the training records because that's the regulations that we adhere to. Then after 6 years, I want to remove financial information from the system, etc. But I want to keep certain elements of data because if you're a government body, for example, you need to keep data for 100 years for certain audit practices. You also have customers where you need to go back into this data on an ad hoc basis when somebody has a query about their pension, because this is how their pensions are calculated based on the data that's inside the SAP system, etc. So there's a whole bunch of flexibility from using our Automate tool, and it enables you to control the life cycle of your HR data, okay? But it also extends out into vendors and customers as well, so you can control the similar sort of aspects of data with your specifically with customers, etc. One of the other things you can do with this, which was kind of like an also sort of feature which came up very nicely for some of our customers, was well, if we've got this deployed in our development and quality environments, and we can use that to be GDPR compliant in our dev and QA systems. So at the touch of a button, you can make sure that you're GDPR compliant within your development and QA environments, which has been proven very useful. So that's Proceed Automate in a nutshell.
And I think as well, Mark, one of the things I recognize Automate as being great for in those dev and QA environments is, if you've done a production copy, you'll have it's obviously the same size as production. It's going to be a big system. Automate can very quickly remove certain data sets, either soft deletion or even the hard deletion. Soft deletion is going to make the data safer in your test environments. Hard deletion is going to remove it altogether and make that test environment smaller, because obviously the test environment's still taking up space, just like live is. So I see some great advantages with automators to very quickly being able to create a test environment that is suitable for the testing that's required, but not a behemoth like the production system is. So that for me is a real great advantage of Automate, and again, in terms of that, not just compliance, but keeping the database as lean as possible, and making the storage requirements smaller.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Okay, and we're just on to our last little section here. The question is, when addressing compliance, how do businesses need to approach different types of data, so supplier, customer, and employee data?
Want me to take this one, Mark?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, please.
Yeah. So the again, if we stick to the the subject of the webinar, why is this relevant to be beyond compliance? Well, there's some interesting things here that we found during our implementations of particularly compliance projects, and one of them in particular is around customers, vendors, suppliers, and business partners. In that SAP will not let you remove that data until the processes are complete for these types of master data. Now, what we're finding is that a lot of customers have not really worried too much about completely closing out all transactions for, say, an old customer. And that means that data has to sit within the system and can't be removed. So in a compliance project, quite often we end up exposing issues in the business process. And by doing that, we are able to help customers improve their business process, help the system to have more closed transactions. And particularly, again, when we look at the transition to S/4HANA, that is, SAP are, very big now on trying to get you to standardize processes as much as possible, recognize where there are gaps in business processes, where a process isn't quite completing or working properly, where there might be something dropping between the lines and something is not completed. And a compliance project can expose that in a business process, and then of course we can look at how we can solve it. By solving it, we are able to then solve the compliance problem because we can remove the data, but also you end up with a better business process, which will probably fit into S/4HANA better, but it will also mean your system is a lot cleaner than it was, and perhaps you might even find that there are some automation in there, which currently maybe there's certain tasks that are being done manually, maybe there's some tweaks that are being done, various different processes that are done as workarounds, which really, once you solve the business process, are not required anymore. So the real good benefit there in that business process analysis and finding where that process improvement is a really good knock-on effect of trying to implement the compliance tools.
Great, thank you. Mark, did you have anything to add on that at all?
I think Chris has just about hit every button on the head there with what he's saying. So no.
Okay, brilliant. So we did just want to quickly talk about next steps and how we can kind of help you before we get onto questions. So just another reminder, you can pop questions in the chat box, or there's a Q&A box as well, and we'll get to those in just a moment. But Chris, I wondered if you could just talk through the data assessment and how it might help some of our attendees, in this context.
Sure. So one of the things that we do for customers is we have, as it says there, a free data assessment. So we'll send you some instructions of some information for you to send us on the size of your database. Obviously we're careful not to ask for anything that's sensitive from a GDPR perspective, so that's all covered. What we're really interested in is in the size of the database. Quite commonly at the minute, we do these for customers who are looking to reduce the size of their database. However, it's equally applicable to a GDPR scenario, a compliance scenario, in that we will often find that there are some very big tables that are not just something we can address in terms of, well, yeah, there's a way to make that smaller, just because we want to make it smaller, make the database smaller, but there usually is compliance that we can spot straight away as well, because there are some very key tables for the master data objects that are very easily recognizable. And when you've got master data objects like a customer or an employee, we can see those tables in the data assessment. So it doesn't give us the whole story for compliance, that's for sure. Once we start seeing those big tables for a compliance project, we would dig in a bit further, because there could be some small tables as well that are relevant for compliance. But this is a great way to start off that business case, to say, well, okay, we can see some really big tables there, and we can see some tables that we know as Proceed that we can make smaller. We know from a lot of other customers we've worked with, we can say, yeah, but that's definitely a table that we can quite easily help you make a lot smaller. And we can say, right, and actually, you know what, there's an overlap there because we can see that's a table related to customers, and we can see you're the type of business who your customers are going to be actual people. Now, clearly, some organizations' customers are going to be other businesses, and that's not relevant for GDPR. But if you're a customer which deals with, let's say you're a utilities company, you've got lots of customers who are buying things from you from that perspective, or telecoms company, and you've got lots of customers who are buying telecom services, that sort of thing, your customers are going to be GDPR relevant. Employees, if you're running HR and payroll on the system, then clearly that's GDPR relevant as well. So by doing the free data assessment, we can help you on that journey to help you with that, start that business case, and help you understand where the clearest benefits might be.
Okay, so all there's left to say is thank you for joining. Hope you found it insightful, and you can see on the right hand side there's our contact details there if you want to get in touch, either book the assessment or talk to one of our member of our team about your business case or your current situation, your specific needs. Yeah, that's it. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.